Now to Austria, where the far-right Freedom Party is celebrating its first parliamentary election victory, winning around 29% of the vote, according to preliminary results. The party has vowed to create what it calls a fortress against migrants. Chancellor Karl Nehammer's governing Conservatives came in second and have indicated they won't form a coalition with the Freedom Party under its current leader.
Protests greet the Freedom Party's election win, with opponents saying it's still tied to its Nazi past. The party leader, Herbert Kickl, claims they have made history by securing nearly one-third of the vote, marking the first time since its foundation 7 decades ago that the party has won a parliamentary election.
We have opened the door to a new era. Together, we are now going to write a new chapter in Austrian history.
On top of the controversy over its Nazi origins, the party also campaigned on an anti-immigration platform. Opponents say its victory will have far-reaching consequences. That means social cuts for Austria. That means lower salaries. That means a catastrophe, especially for migrants and for women who are demanding abortion rights. We started demonstrating 40 years ago, and I can't do it anymore. While opponents have united against Kickl and his party, some Austrians say they are willing to give the election winners a chance. I actually wouldn't have wanted that result, but maybe you have to give them a try.
I think the other parties, including the Greens, will form a three-way coalition. That would be a logical outcome for me.
Kickl will need the support of other parties to form a coalition government, but none have so far agreed to work with him.
Let's bring in Lucia Schulten here. She's in Vienna and was at the far-right Freedom Party's victory celebrations last night. Lucia, Austria's centre-right Conservatives say they won't join a government with the Freedom Party under its current leader, Herbert Kickl. What is it about him that they object to?
Yeah, he's definitely a very controversial figure here in Austrian politics. We have heard from the Conservative Party leader, Karl Nehammer, that he thinks Herbert Kickl is a security risk to the country with regards to what Herbert Kickl did say about certain initiatives when it comes to defending the country. We have also heard from Andreas Babler, he is the head of the centre-left Social Democrats, that he thinks Herbert Kickl is a threat to democracy. And both men, they are placed on the second and third place after the election, or their parties did come in on the second and third place, and both men have said that they are not going to work together with Herbert Kickl to form a coalition government.
So despite their victory, it sounds like the Freedom Party could have a tough time forming a government?
That is correct. So what I just said about the centre, about the Conservative Party, holds true for Herbert Kickl as a person, but the party, the People's Party, did not completely exclude working together with Herbert Kickl's far-right party, FPÖ, but they said we are not going to sit in a government together with Herbert Kickl as a person. What is still possible is also that the other parties will all talk together and form a coalition, leaving Herbert Kickl's far-right FPÖ completely out of the game.
The FPÖ, or Freedom Party, what made that Freedom Party so popular with voters?
Yeah, so what seems to become clear here is that they have been tapping into anxieties, especially with regards to the economy in Austria. So a lot of people have said that they're worried about the high prices for the cost of living. And then also another really big issue for many here has been the topic migration, and there the far-right FPÖ stands for this topic and is considered competent, apparently, by some voters. So these are the salient topics, have been the salient topics here in this election campaign, and also people have been dissatisfied with how things were.
Now, the far right's been making gains, one gain after another, in elections in the EU. I know you cover European affairs, Lucia. You're based in Brussels generally. What message does all this send to European leaders?
Yeah, so I'd say there is a certain mood change, and I've been talking to an expert about these topics and topics that are important for people when they go voting before. And she said that indeed the topic migration is a really important one, and we have seen this here in the last couple of months, in the last elections also, for example, in the Netherlands. But also there we have seen that the cost of living and the living conditions for people here in the European Union are also important topics for them when they go to the polls.
Lucia, thank you very much. That was our correspondent, Lucia Schulten, in Vienna. Let's get a view on all this from Brussels. Our correspondent, Christine Mundwa, is standing by there. Christine, the far right has been winning elections across Europe, Austria being the latest country to go that direction. What does all this mean for the European Union?
Far-right parties have a very different vision of Europe, what European society should look like, and how Europe should actually be. We see this in a number of issues pertaining to migration policy, pertaining to the war in Ukraine, climate change policy, and the growing influence that they're having at a national government level in places where they are governing, in places where they form a strong opposition. We also see that their influence is growing at a European Parliament level. Just after the parliamentary elections, they made a really strong showings. This is far-right parties across European countries. So their growing influence is going to impact European Union policy going forward on a number of issues. The hardline stances that they take when it comes to migration, the war in Ukraine, for example, being perhaps the most immediate concerns for establishment parties and leaders in Europe right now.
Support for anti-immigrant parties in Europe is surging. What could that mean for Europe's migrants and refugees themselves?
The European Union just agreed on a common pact for migration and asylum policy. This is something that took a decade to achieve. Not everybody is happy with it. Essentially, it is about how the European Union will share the load of migration. At the moment, we see that some countries bear a bigger burden than other countries do. And what this pact sought to do really at the heart of it was to distribute the load among the EU's 27 member states. We're already getting the sense from some far-right politicians who are close to power, either in government or in some other way, indicating that they will be looking at that migration pact at ways in which they could potentially opt out of some of those clauses. The migration pact is legally binding, but there are already indications that some countries will not be cooperating in the way that they should be because of this far-right influence, especially because far-right parties and politicians take the stance that they don't want any migrants coming into their countries. We could also potentially see European Union countries start to shift off the burden on their part. So, for example, we see that Italy has reached an agreement with Albania where asylum processing will happen in Albania, and potentially a scenario where failed asylum seekers will remain in Albania and other third countries. So it's certainly going to look like there's going to be a hardened stance when it comes to migration in the European Union because of this far-right influence and how the mainstream parties are sort of feeling that they need to respond to that by themselves, taking harder positions on the issue.
Now, some of Europe's far-right parties are sympathetic to Russia. Could that impact European support for Ukraine, Christine?
There are huge concerns about that, Terry, and we're certainly seeing it in the rhetoric. A lot of these parties oppose, for example, sanctions on Russia. They're vocal about that. They're also questioning the financial commitment that the European Union has made to Ukraine, this long-standing support that Europe has really championed in the way of financial support, sending weapons. This is something that they're questioning at a time that it resonates with a lot of European households where inflation is particularly high, there are budget constraints. And so the message is resonating and landing with people who feel perhaps maybe the money that is being sent to Ukraine should be redirected and positioned elsewhere. So this is coming at a time where we don't know what the outcome will be in the United States. Europe is a crucial backer for Ukraine. And going forward, if it's going to be more difficult to get those deals to come through for Ukraine, this will be a real big challenge.
Christine, thank you very much. That was our Brussels correspondent, Christine Mundwa.